Normally, when you look at an MLB lineup, you'll see some pretty good hitters in the top half and then a gradual decline towards batters that just don't scare you at all. The 2022 Dodgers did not seem to get the memo that that's how lineups are supposed to look. With the signing of Freddie Freeman and the addition of the DH in the National League, LA is now rolling out a lineup as star-studded as any we've seen in a long time. It's way too early in the season to be crowning a team for any reason, but it's never too early to make a fun YouTube video. So let's ask the question.
The 2022 Los Angeles Dodgers, can they be the greatest lineup in baseball history?
Now, I know you're watching thinking, hey, well, they haven't been that great so far. Okay, relax. You understand why we're asking this question. Look at the names in this lineup and tell me that this isn't possible. We're going to break this down very thoroughly and try to answer this question. So, Jake Mintz, what makes a lineup great? What does it take to have a great lineup?
There are three things for us that encapsulate a truly great lineup. The first thing is the numbers. That's obvious, right? If you're well known and you're famous and you're cool, but you don't hit, if you don't bang, if you don't rake, history will forget you, and so will we.
Baseball Reference will not remember you.
I mean, it will, because it remembers everybody. No matter
it will, but I won't go on Baseball Reference to remember you.
Your link will stay blue. It will not turn purple. The second thing is accolades, right? And by accolades, we mean MVPs, All-Star games, how many Hall of Famers. And that's related to our third category, which we call cultural gravitas. Did you have a nickname? Did you win the World Series?
Are we still talking about you, right? And not just in this very specific video on our YouTube channel because we love baseball.
The 1927 Yankees is that. We will get to them later, but before we begin, make sure you like and subscribe down below. We're trying to build this YouTube channel up. Help us out. Before we really hop into who the greatest lineups are, we're going to explain a statistic called OPS Plus, because OPS Plus is kind of our guide for this entire conversation. Jordan, you're smarter than me. You wear glasses. Tell me about OPS Plus.
We know OPS. We know on base plus slugging. On base, how often you're reaching base. Plus your slugging percentage. How many bases are you acquiring when you are reaching base? What OPS Plus does is it adjusts it for park, how easy is it to hit in each park, and it adjusts it for league. And what that does is it gives us a number relative to 100, which is league average. 100 is league average in that individual season. 110 is above league average. 120 is even more, about 20% above league average. 130, 140, and so on.
This is important for our conversation because we're going to be comparing between eras. It was significantly easier to hit a home run in 1999 than it was in 1982 because of good drugs and maybe the ball and how it flew and the good drugs. So the first step is to talk about the 2022 Dodgers. You know them. We're not going to go guy by guy necessarily. And what makes them different, what makes them unique, what makes them relevant is that there is a possibility that every single one of the hitters in their starting lineup, their optimized best starting lineup that they've used a handful of times already this year, could have every guy with an OPS plus over 100. That means every hitter in their lineup is legitimately above average. Now, I know that sounds like a low bar, but it's actually incredibly difficult to do that. Only one team in baseball history has had all of their starting hitters with OPS pluses over 100. And we'll get to them.
We will obviously get to them in this video. Not to mention the obvious ceiling of guys like Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and Trey Turner and even Cody Bellinger, whose ceiling for an OPS plus is even higher than their career numbers. But we have to compare them, right? Now, it's early, but who is their competition? Because if they're going to be the greatest lineup of all time, we have to compare them to the other teams that we often call the greatest lineups of all time and ask the question, is this Dodgers lineup better than that lineup?
In this corner, in the blue shorts, the 2022 Los Angeles Dodgers. I almost said Brooklyn. And in this corner, a variety of the greatest lineups of all time. Our first category of great lineups, Jordan. The lineups that you maybe don't think about, but were holy crap elite. And we're going to turn the clock back.
Oh, yeah.
A lot to 1875 and talk about the 1875 Boston Red Stockings.
Yes, well, obviously, if you just do the quick and dirty stat head search, give me best lineup all time, OPS plus, I don't care what year it is, I don't care how many games they played, it will tell you that the 1875 Boston Red Stockings, who scored 10 runs a game with a 149 OPS plus in the National Association, are the highest and best for any team ever. Now, all the obvious caveats. It's 1875. They only played 82 games. They went 71-8 and 3 ties because everyone else sucked. That said, that's not to say for the time they had some pretty badass baseball players, and we have to mention them.
Who was stocking up hits for this team? Tell me about one or two of the guys.
Oh man. Well, they did have some Hall of Famers. Jim O'Rourke, Deacon White, by Baseball Reference, player number 1 when you go back to 1871. Deacon White, their star catcher with a 178 OPS plus. I think the most fun thing that carries this, their pitcher, Al Spalding, who also threw 600 innings, had a 134 OPS plus and over 300 plate appearances.
Zach Greinke could never.
Spalding basketball, Spalding Sporting Goods, that is him. He's the guy that started that. Okay, again, we're talking about the freaking 1870s.
This isn't just they didn't play against black players and Latin American players, right? This is baseball wasn't real. It was not the same thing that we have today or even had in 1922, okay? And for that reason, you really can't seriously sit down and tell me that this is the greatest lineup of all time. Maybe, like Keith Olbermann thinks this. Maybe he is a diehard.
I feel pretty good that even Edwin Rios, who would probably put up a 200 OPS plus at least in 1875.
The 1875 Red Stockings were the greatest baseball lineup of all time. They have a space between the sport, okay? Mm-hmm. When baseball became baseball, that's the difference. And we will move forward to the 1943 Homestead Grays of the Negro Leagues. We tossed around a number of different Negro Leagues lineup, but this one stood out. We think this is the greatest Negro Leagues lineup of all time, and certainly up there as one of the greatest just lineups of all time.
One of the great things of the last few years, Baseball Reference has been adding an incredible amount of Negro Leagues data. And if we do some stat searches, you will see these teams popping up. And why did we pick the 1943 Homestead Grays over the 1937 Homestead team? The St. Louis Stars in the 20s were also putting up crazy numbers. Well, we're going with the 43 squad because not only did they win the Negro League World Series and go 53-14, they had the best single season ever by a single player who was also catching. Salvador Perez, eat your heart out. Josh Gibson. Let's read this triple slash for Mr. Gibson. 69 games for Josh Gibson. He hit 466, 560, 867 for a 1427 ops, 281 OPS plus, 20 homers, 22 doubles in 69 games.
But how are his framing metrics?
Oh, that's true. Never mind. He's not good. I take it back. I take it all back. Now, having Josh Gibson's 281 OPS plus, that's pretty good. But it wasn't just him. They had all kinds of other Negro League Hall of Fame stalwarts, including a 40-year-old Cool Papa Bell, who still managed to put up a 134.
More like Cool Grandpapa Bell.
Buck Leonard with a 153. And then a bunch of other guys you may not know about who were also just as amazing.
Now, our verdict here, they only played 68, 69 games as a team,
games, yeah.
Which, again, not their fault because racism. This team, I think, as a unit, would have been able to compete in the major leagues at the time. But I don't think Josh Gibson is putting up a 281 OPS plus in a full MLB season. He's probably putting up like a 195 or a 204, but 281 is bonkers. And then one last team we got to talk about that you maybe don't know a whole lot about. Certainly a team that we as youngsters didn't know a ton about. The 1982 Milwaukee Brewers. I could have given Jordan 100 guesses, and he never would have guessed this team. This squad made it all the way to Game 7 of the World Series before losing to the Cardinals. They are iconic. They are well known. Jordan, do you know their nickname?
I don't. Tell me.
They were known as Harveys Wallbangers. Do you know what a Harvey Wallbanger is?
Please, educate us all.
A Harvey Wallbanger is a mixed drink made with vodka Galliano, which is a type of liqueur, and orange juice. It's like a very 70s cocktail, right? But the 1982 Brewers were nicknamed the Harveys Wallbangers because of the team's power hitting. They were banging it off the walls, and their manager was Harvey Kuhn. Harveys Wallbangers.
I love that. They were also hitting it over the wall. This team, God level Robin Yount, a 10-win season. He was the MVP, of course, a 166 OPS plus. Not the only Hall of Famer in the lineup. We got Paul Molitor also in there with the 129. We got Ted Simmons with just a 112, but still for a switch hitting catcher, that's pretty freaking good. He's in the Hall of Fame now. And then you got Cecil Cooper, who was a beast, and then Gorman Thomas and Ben Ogilvy both hit over 30 homers. This team on their own, a 121 OPS plus is behind only some of the teams we're going to talk about later in this video. And that is very impressive.
They were 23-24 to start the year. And their manager, Buck Rogers, was fired middle of the year in May.
Wasn't Buck's Wallbangers.
It wasn't Buck's Wallbangers. Harveys. So they picked up that nickname halfway through the year. maybe a team that doesn't have the big market oomph like the 1927 Yankees, but certainly deserves to be in the conversation.
I really think if they win the World Series, we had known about them way more before that. Is the 2022 Dodgers lineup, could it be better than this one?
Yeah, I think it definitely could, and that's just because of the bottom of this order. If you take a glance there, Roy Howell, Charlie Moore, Jim Gantner, none of those dudes had an OPS plus over 100. Howell and Moore were well below. I don't foresee the Dodgers having two guys at 85.
All right, we move to our next category, the steroid era legends. We have three teams here. Obviously, offense was up in the late 90s, early 2000s for all the reasons we know. That doesn't make these lineups any less fun. These three lineups that we're about to talk about, none of them won the World Series, but oh boy, these are some fun groups of hitters. So let's begin with one that I think when you clicked on this video, pretty sure we were going to talk about. Let's talk about the 1995 Cleveland baseball team. This one, as so many people say, so maybe the best teams to not win the World Series. They came very close, losing to the Braves. 116 OPS plus as a team, and I don't even think that does it justice.
It's a situation where the bottom of the lineup is more impressive than the top. Like 5, 6, 7 of essentially 3 Hall of Famers. I mean, Manny's not technically in the Hall of Fame, but he was good enough to be. Old Murray, young Tomey playing third base, and baby Manny Ramirez in the 7 spot. These were basically 3 of the best hitters in the league. And then peak Albert Bell.
Peak Albert Bell, and then not to mention Kenny Lofton, who arguably should be in too.
And I think Lofton, even though the OPS plus in the season isn't eye-popping, it's important to remember that we're using this metric, but it is more than that. And Lofton, the way that he would get on base and the way he would steal bases and influence the pitcher, that's all super important. I would have probably ordered things significantly differently.
It's hard to say it wasn't working. I mean, I know they didn't win the World Series, but they won 100 games and they were scoring a shit ton of runs. Now, to be fair, I remember them. You can't remember them because you were born in September 95 and I was born in March 95. You might remember the postseason run. So look, trust me, it was really great. It was really cool.
Okay.
I was locked in from the crib.
The things, though, that don't make this the greatest lineup of all time, the roids, we love it. Like, we're still watching these dudes and like these guys anyway. But, I mean, Bell and Manny were clearly on the goods at this point, especially Bell. That being said, let's talk about Paul Sorrento, because Paul Sorrento, their first baseman, a gentleman who I really didn't know a lot about, who posted a 116 OPS plus in the 8-hole, is also on the next team we're going to talk about, the 1997 Mariners.
Our link, let's talk about the 97 Mariners. This team had a 119 team OPS plus. They only won 90 games and lost to your Baltimore Orioles. When you go back and look at this squad, and we got peak Griffey, basically still peak Edgar, and not peak A-Rod, but still amazing A-Rod as a child. And then, as we just mentioned, Paul Sorrento managed to be on this team as well. It's not as iconic as even the 01 team or the 95 team, but when you look at the overall OPS plus numbers, they're right there.
This team has fewer steroid eyebrow raises, I think, than 95 Cleveland and the team we're about to talk about, the 03 Red Sox, but it's not even the second most famous Mariners team. Even though this is probably Griffey's best offensive season, I just don't.
Homers,
not the best lineup of all time.
No, it's not. And if anything, it really goes to show like this era of Mariners baseball was pretty incredible. Let's move to our last team in this category, the 03 Red Sox. Not the 04 Red Sox, the 03 Red Sox. How did their season end? I don't know. We don't remember. We don't really care how that happened for that team. Here's what happens for the 03 Red Sox. You have Nomar, who obviously freaking awesome. You have Manny, who we already mentioned, talk about, he was doing it 8 years prior, and he's still killing it. You have David Ortiz doing, this is it, hey, look at me, I'm one of the best DHs of all time. And what really puts this team over the top is Bill Miller and Trot Nixon having absolute career years at the bottom of the lineup. A 140 OPS plus for both of them is insane to have for your 7 and 8 hitters.
Can't be the greatest lineup of all time. In our opinion, put the steroid guys in the Hall of Fame, but Manny Ramirez was, this is probably peak Manny.
This is 160 OPS plus for him, and also how it ended. Obviously, not the lineup's fault, but still, how we remember them is not that they had a 118 OPS plus. Now, can the Dodgers be better than this lineup? In terms of star power, this is tough to top.
One no doubt Hall of Famer in Ortiz. Manny, skill-wise, is in. Garcia Parra, Damon, who are 2 perennial all-stars of the era, and then a bunch of career years from guys. Dodgers better. I think Dodgers can be better than this.
That's our steroid era collection. Of course, there are other great teams. We didn't mention the team that had Barry Bonds, but that's fine. All right, let's move on to the upper crust, the inner sanctum of the best lineups of all time.
The GOATs.
The GOATs, baby. GOAT talk. That's all sports media is GOAT talk now.
Are the 1927 Yankees in the conversation? Yes, they are, because we're about to talk about them. When you say greatest lineup of all time, this is the first thing that comes to, I would say, 90% of baseball fans' minds, right?
Not just in like a trivia sense, in like a social conversation sense. If a team now is like hitting well for a week, the broadcast will just be like, oh, these guys are like the 27 Yankees. Like, that is what you are still saying 100 years later.
They have a nickname, Murderers Row, right? They were that. It's iconic. It's historic. That being said, it's also overrated.
Now, why is it overrated? Now, look, they won 110 games. They won the World Series. By F-WAR, it's the most F-WAR an offense has ever had. 49 F-WARs. Why is this overrated? 127 OPS plus. Holy shit, insane. A little top heavy. Now, as far as top heavy goes, it's the best top heavy you can get. Because
good weight.
You have Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, both with OPS pluses over 200 in a major league season. They had two of the best seasons in the first half century of baseball happened for the same two players on the same team in the same year. But they did have some other good players. It's just that like that alone is just carrying them to such a crazy degree. It is both a point in their favor and a point against them.
I would walk them.
Maybe don't pitch to Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
Stars and scrubs lineup right here. Not scrubs, stars and just regular guys. I mean, regular guys is not fair. I mean, Combs had a 141 and Musial had a 135 and whatever.
But man, this was two of the best ever.
These are the OG 2022 top heavy Los Angeles Angels. That being said, we're going to go ahead and say not the greatest lineup of all time because one, too top heavy, and two, just, as is company policy here at the Cespedes Family Barbecue, anything before Jackie Robinson gets a nice pre-integration asterisk slapped right over it.
Speaking of asterisks, let's move on to our next contender. Let's talk about the 2017 Astros.
Let's have that conversation.
123 OPS plus is the best ever modern era besides those 27 Yankees. Now you say, they cheated! Oh my God. They did, you're right. It's true. Maybe their OPS plus would have only been 120. But when you look at the names of this lineup, and you look at what they've done since, and what they did even before, it is impossible to deny that the 2017 Astros are one of the greatest lineups we have ever seen.
But that's because of the 2019 team. The 2019 team, as far as we know, was not cheating to the same extent, had a lot of the same players, obviously some changes, but was in the neighborhood of the 2017 team.
This is the other thing. The 19 team also belongs in this conversation.
But the difference between elite and all-time, for us, is the cheating. And here's how that happens. Talking to people around baseball, you get the sense that no one thinks that George Springer, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, Alex Bregman were creations of a trash can. They have been great hitters since. They were great hitters before. They will continue to be great. Josh Reddick had a career year. He's very low on the bang list. We checked it, okay? Not a big bang guy. The rest of the dudes at the bottom of the order are the clear and obvious beneficiaries of the trash can, particularly Marwin Gonzalez and his 146 OPS plus. No one benefited more. No one received more trash can slams than Marwin. And if you take his 146 and without the bangs, it's like a 120. This is not the greatest lineup of all time. That's what those are the margins we're talking about.
It's that, it's Gaddis, it's Marisnik, and even Tyler White, Jay Davis, like those
Beltran.
Extra at bats at the bottom make a big difference when we are talking about the margins here. Astros, credit. It is still one of the best lineups we've ever seen. It felt at the time when we didn't know they were cheating. After the fact, I'm still like, yeah. And after obviously in 19, I'm like, oh yeah. This era of Astros lineups deserves to be part of this conversation. And so now, Dodgers fans watching this can take this extra personally, but can we think this Dodgers lineup can be better than these Astros teams?
If the 2022 Dodgers know what's coming, they would be better than the 2017 Astros. That's my take.
They could. That's a good way to put it, though. But, man, those teams, even the 19 team, it's a crazy, crazy bar.
But there is one team in baseball history, I think we agree, unequivocally, is out of reach of the 2022 Dodgers. There is one lineup that is the gold standard in terms of numbers, historical importance, and accolades, and that, Jordan, is the 1976 Cincinnati Reds the biggest, reddest of all the machines.
120 OPS plus and a sixth best all time. This team, as we mentioned in the beginning, 8 qualified hitters with an OPS plus of 100 or better. No one has done that except for them since 1937. When we look at this Dodgers lineup now and we project it and we say it's all going to work out, it says, oh my God, they could do this. But it's probably not going to happen because it's really hard and it's only happened once in the last almost 100 years because this wasn't just a bunch of good players. Okay.
It wasn't a bunch of solid hitters.
Who was on the 1976?
They had 3 guys finish in the top 4 of MVP voting. Joe Morgan, who won the award with 9.6 WAR. George Foster finished second. He would go on to win the MVP the following season. And Pete Rose, I don't know if you know about him, not in the Hall of Fame. He finished 4th in the voting. Mike Schmidt finished 3rd. This team had 3 Hall of Famers in the lineup between Tony Perez, Johnny Bench, and Joe Morgan. George Foster has an MVP. Ken Griffey Sr. is more than just Ken Griffey Jr.'s dad.
Yeah, and Ken Griffey Sr. finished 8th in the MVP in this same year, with the other 3 guys finishing in the top 4. But also, what do? They didn't lose a postseason game. 7-0 in the playoffs. They steamrolled everybody, as you would expect. And it's one of the cleanest, most satisfying baseball reference pages you can open. And statistically, they stack up. And historically, they stack up. They have the nickname. They've got the Hall of Famers. They've got the players you love, the players you hate, the players it's got everything. It's a balanced lineup.
My favorite thing is that it was a Johnny Bench down year. Right? Johnny Bench, the greatest hitting catcher in baseball history, had a perfectly fine season. Nowhere near his peak. And it just so happens that was the year that the Reds had the single greatest lineup in baseball history.
Barely missed his 7-year peak where he won 2 MVPs, finished top 5 2 other times.
The year before, he had a 140 OPS plus, and the year after, he had a 133.
And 5 years before, it was 166. So it's a great point. It's a great point that this was a down bench year. Yeah. And that brings us to the question, can the Dodgers be better than this? Well, I think something that has stood out as we've compared here often is, Will Smith could be might be the best hitting catcher already in baseball. And very few of these teams had catchers that could put up a 130, 140 OPS plus. And even though Johnny Bench did a 109 there, he's still Johnny Bench, right? So I'll cancel out Will Smith there. And so that's already a huge advantage for the Dodgers. It's tough to overcome. And that's why it would be very hard for me to imagine it. Any team, let alone the 2022 Dodgers.
And it's more than the numbers, as we said at the beginning. This team, right, it's 3 Hall of Famers. Well, let's say 3.5 with Pete Rose. And then Ken Griffey and George Foster are 2 era iconic names. Grids. If we look at the Dodgers and we say, okay, who are the Hall of Famers? If we want to say that Freeman and Betts are in, I'm fine with that. Fine with that. The third guy is probably Trey Turner, and I would say right now it's like a 30% chance he gets into the Hall of Fame for the rest of his career. And then beyond that, there's no one else. And there are great players, memorable players on this Dodgers lineup. That's why we're talking about them. But in terms of longevity and iconicness, I think it is a step behind the 76 Reds. Now, maybe time will tell, and Gavin Lux and Cody Bellinger, Will Smith will all turn into incredible 150 OPS plus Hall of Famers, and we just can't see that from now, from where we're sitting. That being said, I would bet against it. I'm taking the 76 Reds wherever I go.
76 Reds. That is our pick for the greatest lineup of all time. Can the Dodgers do it? We don't think so. Let us know. Are we crazy? Are we forgetting any lineups that you think we should have mentioned? Let us know. Comments below. Like and subscribe. And any final words, Jake Mintz? What do you think about Edwin Rios?
Edwin Rios, shouts out to you. And are we sleeping on the 2022 Phillies?
No, I don't think we are.